Okay, so so welcome to episode one of the Syllogist. This is going to be a periodic podcast about um high school discourse. Okay, so today we're just gonna talk about like the current situation when it comes to high school discourse and the ethics of persuasion. So, Kevin, Kevin is our co-founder or co-host, and what do you
Give me
think of
permission. Can you
what?
first give me permission
No,
to the Google Doc?
The Google Docs is for Zeitgeist. Zeitgeist.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so essentially, okay, now
Are we
question one
doing
for
this
you.
like video recording? Video recording every
Yes,
time.
this is a video recording that we can we can upload it to Spotify, I think, or something.
With the video?
Yeah.
Okay.
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 So,
Right.
weird. Okay, so to what extent do you consider conversations between the typical high school students too superficial or superfluous, fluous? I don't know. Superficial.
Um, Personally, I think most of people talk about um are usually like not for the sake of like learning more, but just for the sake of having fun. So I think in
Yeah,
that sense, they all have value in themselves, and you can't really just label some of them as useless or superficial, as you said.
that's true. Yeah, I agree with that. So, but like when it comes to challenging one's stance, for example, okay, to what extent do you think the average high school student have thought about like issues such as like abortion or affirmative action? Like, to what extent do you think that they have considered the stances of both sides?
Well, I think personally, I think these problems do enter our lives. For example, when I was in a summer school, we did talk about the affirmative action when it first came out. But I think the point is that everyone considers it from their own perspective. For example, in our class, I believe that was a diverse classroom. We had black, um, white, and Asian, and you know, I think we like in that environment, right? You are forced to consider the problem from the perspective of your classmates. But in, for instance, like international school in China, everyone's Asian, so everyone just kind of like thinks under this fixed mindset. And I think this is just one example of how the group you're in can largely affect which side of the argument you're on.
Of course. So, all right. So, have you ever tried talking to like your classmates in school, like not in the summer school you went to, but like in the school you go
Mhm.
to like regularly? Have you ever tried like talking to them about like any controversial issues?
Well, yeah, I do. In fact, as a member of the philosophy club, I like to bring up these ethical topics and talk about them. As well as, yeah, I think ethical problems, for one, I think the problem is that it's inextricably linked to political stance. And that's something that you cannot really talk about, at least not in a formal environment. So, that's one thing I concern, sort of, over discussing these problems in public.
So you're saying that there are like political sort of like influences or constraints over the discussion of these topics.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, so outside of the philosophy club, like just day-to-day conversations, do you see people bringing up these controversial topics?
Well, honestly, like, I rarely have day-to-day conversations with people. I'm usually
Okay,
just reading by myself, so
yeah,
no, I would say. Not really.
yeah,
Because
because yeah,
these problems are kind of far away, I feel like.
yeah, I've tried to like talk to people about these topics, and from what I learned, I feel like a lot of people have like they're confused about the is-ought distinction, which is pretty shocking to me, and they're not quite open to the other side's opinion, so to speak. So, okay, can you introduce the mission of the syllogist?
Well, the mission of us is we encourage people to consider controversial ethical issues, strip of their political outlook, and we consider them from multiple perspectives without giving a definitive answer.
Yeah, that is true. We're trying to make people more open, essentially. All right. Um. Okay, I don't have any more questions on this topic,
Okay,
actually. Okay,
no,
let's
like
talk about yeah, yeah,
actually, like
yeah.
this all problem. I'm pretty sure like there is actually like people arguing that the Isot problem can actually be solved, like it can be bridged. For example, John Ross, I believe, had an important paper of how the idea of justice can bridge is from ought or ought from is. Yeah. No, actually, just cut this part out. But it's interesting. Like you can search. Like the Isot problem actually is not that uncontroversial as you may have thought.
Yo, yo, yo. So wait. So what do you say?
Wait, let me search here. I've gotten into the Islot problem before, and there are people offering solutions like John Ross, claiming that the Islot problem is not a real problem. Like like it's a misunderstanding rather than a problem. Like you can get from is to ought. Let me try to find it.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Oh yeah, John Sorrell. Do you know this guy?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. So basically, he wrote a paper called "How to Derive Ought from Is" on the Philosophical, which is like the most prestigious journal. Um,
That's really cool. Yeah.
yeah, I can send the PDF to you later.
Cool. Cool.
But
So okay, now okay. Okay. So do you think there might exist any moral concerns for just like approaching like a friend and like asking challenging their like views? For example, like if you know that your friend is like a theist, like or a Christian, like do you think there might exist any moral concerns in just like going up to him and just like try to challenge his stance or like make him think about his stance?
I think there is actually because um, I think it's called fatalism or something. Fatalism or fatalism, like the
Yeah, can
idea
you expand?
that like the idea that like you believe in God on faith alone. It's like it's either proposed by John Calvin or Martin Luther. Well, so some ideas like even if you challenge it, right, you'll get to the point where, let's say for theology, you'll get to the point where they just rely on intuition, and the same is true for moral problems. So I would say that only debate these problems with people who you can establish a common ground. That's for one, and second, that the other person actually wants to discuss this problem. Um,
Yeah. Okay. So, but the thing is, you don't know if they. Okay. What if you don't know that if they like, you don't know if they want to do it like discuss or not. Sorry.
You just ask them. For example, like my history teacher, I don't think I should speak of his name here, but my history teacher came to my philosophy club, and I asked him like if he wanted to discuss some ethical dilemmas, borderline cases about transsexuality, and he agreed, and we had a very fruitful discussion for 2 hours about transsexuality. So I think that's an instant of how you can ask for permission, and also like respectively engage in civic discussion, etc. As long as you have the other's approval.
Okay, but the thing is, when you ask him, well, like whether he wants to engage in this like discussion, like I mean, like this is an infinite regress, right? Because you can never know whether like asking the first question, like whether he wants you to ask the first question or not.
I think most people are fine with that question because you let's just say that what people don't want is like pressing questioning, like if you press them too much.
Mm.
And if you just ask them like casually, it's fine. Like I think it's not just what you ask that's important, but how you ask it is also a very key component.
Right. So do you see any like ethical concerns potentially like with the syllogist?
Well, ethical concerns not really, but I do see potentially political concerns.
Okay, yeah. Okay. All right. One of the missions of the syllogist is to try to persuade people in being more rational, or so to speak, more open to the other side's opinions. So,
Hmm.
well, yeah. Do you think that um there is any sort of moral obligation for an individual to be rational when he is in society as a part of society?
That's a very good question, and I'm glad you asked because I've actually read a considerable amount of literature on whether holding a belief can be moral, whether you should be rational, whether that's linked to morality. And I think this question really breaks down to two sub questions. The first question is whether being irrational can ever be moral. And I think the answer to this is yes. Let me just give you a very simple example. For example, if Henry, let's say you're going on a date, right? And
Uh-huh.
you know that like you're a shy. I know you're not a shy person, but like suppose that you're a shy person, and you know that you're not gonna have fun if you are, acting shy. So you convince yourself to believe in the irrational belief that maybe she has a crush on you, and as a result, you become more open. You guys had a fun time, and the question comes down to: is that irrationality morally justified? And the answer is yes, right? I mean, in terms of utility, both of you had fun in terms of, but the problem here is deontology, right? Are you doing a wrong act even if the consequences turn out to be good? Now, this
Mhm.
is of course a way larger debate in moral philosophy, but I think for these cases, we would agree that Henry did not transgress any major moral codes just by pretending that. The second question is whether you're epistemically justified to be irrational. And I think the answer to that is quite simple. The answer is no, because we all have an epistemological obligation to act rationally. I think that's
Right.
pretty self-explanatory.
Okay. Okay. Hmm. Okay. So,
What do you think about this?
I mean, okay, the fact that you live in a society with law seems to, but it seems to kind of impose upon you sort of like that you have to follow what society considers rational, right? Like, because okay, so let's just say society. Okay, I think we can agree that society thinks that it is irrational to allow people to kill each other, right? Like the majority of people
Mm-hmm.
believe in that, but certainly some minority does not. So, but the minority, it's sort of like the tyranny of the majority, but um, to live in a society, right? Like because of law.
Yeah, actually, I think what you're referring to sounds like to me the idea of the cult of rationality. The cult of rationality is a word adopted by Israel Berlin who is a very distinguished German historian to describe the outcome of the French Revolution, which created a cult of reason. Now, the cult of reason is the idea that rationality must be imposed on everyone, and rationalism is made like a atheistic religion. That's actually the word used on its exact Wikipedia page, an atheistic religion, the cult of reason. So, what I think is that there definitely be backlash to this cult of rationality because not everyone, especially nowadays, would agree with the Enlightenment values and Enlightenment positivism regarding moral political questions. And one of the major outcome of that is the German Romanticism. The can't get the name right, but yes, German Romanticism was the major reaction to this cult of rationality, and basically says that some things aren't able to be rationally analyzed, and some like chief examples it gave would be like Goethe, the tragedy of the young water. I cannot remember, but But the thing is, like things like death, love, life, friendship, these cannot be analyzed rationally, and thus the cult of rationality cannot be imposed as a universal ideal.
Yeah, cool. Let me get my question sheet really quick. One sec. Okay. Okay, let me ask you this then. Um, this question may sound vague, but does one have a moral duty to be rational when it concerns society? You can like define your terms how you want.
Okay, a moral duty to be rational when it concerns society. So what is the thing that concerns society?
Um,
Like the
whether you be rational, like yeah, whether you be rational, your rationality.
well, whether you have a duty. Now, I think the vague word here uses duty because by duty we usually use it in two different senses. There's echo. There's Can you stop that?
Sorry,
I think there's an echo or something.
there's an
It's
echo.
really.
Yeah, I cannot hear you right now.
I think you're. I think you're. Okay, it's good now. Okay. So back to what I was saying. So by duty, there are two kinds of duty. The first kind of duty is what we call prima facie duty, which is the duty you have without major obstructions. For example, perhaps your duty to maybe to pick your sister up after she finishes school. That's prima facie. Let's say meets a person who needs to be hospitalized, right? You need to complete that duty over the duty to pick up your sister after school. So that kind of duty can be override or outpowered or outweighed by other kinds of duty. Now, the other kind of duty is what we call ultima facie duty, which is the kind of duty that is absolute, that you have to follow regardless of what other situations there might be. So the way you're framing your question, I'm feeling like you're pointing towards the ultima facie duty, that rationality should be maintained at all circumstances. Because, it's hard to think of a counterexample, but I'll just I'll just find one easy counterexample to that. Let's this example is actually used in the essay paper about a position called moral evidentialism. We might talk about that later. But it's the idea that you always have an absolute or ultima facie duty to follow rationality. And the thought experiment goes like this. Suppose you're held hostage at a museum, and you have a bomb that is below over 1,000 people, and you have to believe that the Earth is flat, or else the bomb will detonate. And because you're also on a lie detector that is extremely precise, there's no way you can lie about it. So the only thing you can do is to believe genuinely that the Earth is flat. But doing so violates rationality because you don't actually have any good reason or evidence that points towards the belief that the Earth is flat, and every reason against it. Um, so that's an example of how the duty to be rational is actually not absolute.
Okay. Um, all right, but what if okay, what about in cases in which you have like it is epistemologically okay. It is irrational epistemologically for you to believe in proposition A, and it seems that society also wants you to believe in. Okay, never mind. Scratch that. Okay, so let me. Okay, can you define rationality for us?
I think David Hume gives a very good definition of rationality. Um, I forgot the David Hume's exact quote, but he said something like, "The wise man proportions his belief to his evidence," and I think that's what rationality mainly consists in.
Okay, so all right, okay. So do you think that it is possible to be equally rational, to be pro-life, and to be pro-choice?
To be equally rational, pro-life, and pro-choice. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah.
Like, what do you
So
mean?
do you
Is
think
it
that it is possible that, like, for example, like pro-life, the stance pro-life and the stance pro-choice, do you think that these two stances can simultaneously exist as equally rational, like propositions or stances?
Actually, I do, because, it's not that counterintuitive. If two people are brought up into environments, one of which encourages pro-choice, the other encourages pro-life, then they have all their rights to rationally believe one of them. And I think that could be equally rational, of course. Like, the idea is
Okay,
that to
yeah,
to rationally believe something, it's very possible for you to rationally believe a false thing. For
right.
example, if you're born in like ancient Greek, then rationality consists in believing that the Earth is at the center of the what's the word? Like, it's completely rational for you to believe that the Earth is the center of the Earth system, right? Because at that time, that's what the best scientific theories tells you. So I think rationality doesn't necessarily mean what you're believing is correct. It just means that what you're believing is the best you can believe given what you got.
Right. But it seems that Hume's definition of rationality doesn't fit nicely into this case, right? Because there's no scientific basis or evidence that can be caught upon, like when it comes to abortion or affirmative action.
First of all, there are evidence in this human sense understood more generally. For example, testimonial evidence. If a renowned moral philosopher tells you that, let's say, abortion is good, then you have a prima facie, rational choice to believe that abortion is good because it's testimonial evidence. Now, evidence comes in many different forms. Scientific evidence is just one of them.
Okay. Um, all right. So do you think that, abortion is an issue of opinion or value?
Um, Issue of opinion or value. I think it's an issue of value mainly because I am not a big fan of moral relativism. I'm going to get that straight. I think moral judgment are not mere opinions, and I think people like Bernard Rousseau would agree with me in saying that when we consider something to be morally bad, we're not just expressing our opinion, but we're stating a more serious value judgment regarding everyone's opinion. Right? Like, abortion might be a borderline case that will encourage you to think that moral choices are mere opinions. But take more extreme or clear cut cases like the Nazis, there's just no way for you to say that to condemn the Nazis is a matter of personal opinion. I think that goes against the whole purpose of morality as a guidance of behavior that applies to a group of people or to humanity in general. And I think that is the way we assume moral judgments are made on. So I think it's a matter of value rather than opinion.
Right. So what's the difference between value and opinion?
Now, the matter of value is like if if I evaluate this, let's say we have. I think this is best understood in case of merchandise, in case of buying something. If it's a matter of value, then what I'm saying is that this thing is valued at $10 for me, so it should be valued at $10 for everyone. And if you think that it should not be valued at $10, then our disagreement here is not just superficial. We actually have a very real, very serious disagreement about the value of the object. But if we're talking about some other thing like art or music, right? Then it's more of a matter of opinion. Because if I think that this artwork worth $10 and you disagree on me, our disagreement might not be like. I mean, this is not a very good example because some artworks do have values that people agree on. But if it's like contemporary art, like avant-garde art, then we can say that these are just our opinions. Then our disagreement doesn't condense to any real disagreement between our value systems. It's just that we hold different beliefs.
Well, can you please explain to the audience what moral realism is?
There are many different ways to interpret moral realism. Which context?
I don't know, but like, okay, can you explain like the different contexts?
Well, I think moral realism is really just an umbrella term for people who think that certain entities that play a role in ethics are real and that well, that, you know, if you try to, realism, you can just understand it very generally as thinking that moral opinions are real and they have moral propositions have a definite truth value. Uh, This is actually, it goes down to a way deeper debate in metaphysics about whether something can have an indeterminate or non-existent truth value. So let's say that I have a proposition. Now, I'm not going to give moral ones because people will disagree a lot on their nature, but I'll give you one that people are likely to be familiar with, which is Bertrand Russell's example that the king of France is bold. I remind you that France is in fact a republic, which means it does not have a king currently, and for Russell's time, 1905. But the question I want to ask you is this statement that the king of France is bold, is this true or false?
I mean, it's false because, well, okay, if I say blah 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 is blah blah blah, right? This statement is, you would say it's false. I mean, it's possible that it's true once we define these two terms, but we're not defining, like, you know,
So you're saying that the king of France is not bold.
I mean, there's no such thing as King of France.
Okay, so if we use the idea in logic called interchangeability, we can switch out not bold to hairy. So you're saying that the king of France is hairy.
No?
But that's what you implied by saying that the proposition that king of France is not bold is not true. So this is the problem some people raises um about it is that some people say that this proposition that the king of France is not bold, it does not have a truth value. It's not an actual proposition. Because I remind you the definition of proposition entail that they're bearers of truth value. That is, they're either true or they're false. But the king of France in this case does not really seem to have a truth value, this proposition. And of course, philosophers disagree heavily on this issue. Bertrand Russell thinks that the king of France is not bold does have a truth value, and that value is false. But he meets the problem. Like his idea of description denotation kind of breaks down to like if you apply propositional logic, considering propositions as the basic unit of logic, then his theory completely works fine. But if you consider predicate logic, which considers individual denotations as basic logic unit, then his theory kind of breaks down. Because, as Howard refuted Henry, you're able to, put the not within the sentence and say that the king of France is not bold, as opposed to it's not that the king of France is bold. So you're able to make this extra step, which breaks the whole system.
So you're saying that you cannot do that. Like, you cannot put the not before the other parts of the sentence.
Yeah, because it has something to do with the essential quantifier. And the logical property is that you cannot. It's really hard. I don't have something to write with, so let's just leave it at there. Okay. What other question do you have, or do you want to discuss?
Yeah, can you repeat like the definitions of facie and ultima facie?
Yeah. Prima facie is like it translates in English as like at first sight. So if something is prima facie true, then it's true. Like when you see the statement, it's true automatically, but it's not true ultimately because there could be some situation that could make it not true. And ultima facie is you can consider it as like at last sight or all things considered. So if something is ultima facie true, then it's true when all things are considered. Or in other words, it's true no matter what.
Right. So if I say I'm wearing a red shirt, what does that qualify as?
Well, that we usually use this in the context of moral obligations. We don't use it in the context of other things. When we use it in the context of other things, we talk about contingency and analyticity, and that's a different. Yeah, and also
Okay.
fashion, it can be used not as formally; it can also be used informally. For example, like when I say like it's wrong to kill a baby, this statement is prima facie true. It just means that it's intuitively true. And in most of the cases, I'm trying to disprove this prima facie belief, or I'm trying to bolster this prima facie belief with more complex arguments.
Right. Okay. That's it from me.
All right. Well, it's nice talking to you, Henry, and I hope we're able to host more of these syllogist meetings in the future.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you
Thank
for
you.
watching. All right.
All right. See
All
ya.
right. I'll see you later.